Welcome back to Silencer Recaps. We will recap one of Scott Adkins' movies called Prisoner of War, released in 2025. The film begins in 1950, where we are introduced to a man named James Wright, who goes to Ito Dojo alone. Upon entering, he notices some students training and asks their master about the man whose picture is on the wall. The master tells how his father wrote stories about the unwavering fighting spirit and controversial fighting style of a prisoner of war, the only prisoner who defeated the Japanese fighters during World War II. The master warned James that his presence in the dojo brought shame to his family. To show his power, the master ordered his students to help James. Using his amazing speed and fighting skills, James quickly defeated them in a matter of seconds. The master, now intrigued by him, orders James to explain the purpose of his visit. The story goes back to 1942, amidst the chaos of World War II and the Battle of Bataan in the Philippines. Here, we find James Wright, a decorated British pilot serving with the Allied forces, caught up in the fighting against the Japanese. The relentless Japanese attacks prevailed against the Allied troops, and during an air engagement, James's airplane crashed in the jungle. Fortunately, he managed to survive and made it deep into enemy territory, only to find himself surrounded by Japanese soldiers. Bloodied and exhausted, James used what little strength he had left to fight them off. But despite his best efforts, he was eventually captured and taken to a harsh prison of war camp, where conditions were inhumane. Inside this brutal camp, he encountered Lieutenant Colonel Benjiro Ito, who belittled him and the entire Allied troops. After that, he ordered Corporal Akito and the other soldiers to take James into the middle of the forest and kill him there. However, in a desperate attempt to survive, James fought fiercely and killed the soldiers who had captured him. After eliminating them, James fled deeper into the jungle, where he discovered one of their aircraft. But as he began to search for a way out of enemy territory, he was caught in one of their jungle traps. After being captured, he was taken back to the camp and presented to Colonel Ito. Ito confiscated some of James's valuables and promised him death the next day. Inside the prison camp, James met fellow prisoners from various countries, including an American Marine, Filipino resistance fighters, and several Allied soldiers. The next day, Colonel Ito prepared a fight to the death. He put James and several starving prisoners against each other, insisting that only the survivors would be allowed to live.
To the death!
In the end, James faced the strongest prisoner, but he was no match for him either. James used a forbidden technique. Which amazed and got the attention of the Japanese commander. Although James was the winner, he could not help but feel guilty about taking the lives of several innocent prisoners at his own hands. Later that day, Ito's second-in-command asked for permission to kill James. However, Ito refused, insisting that James' time would come soon. Soon, James was taken by Ito's men to their commander's office, where the true extent of his fate lay. There, James encountered a Filipina nurse named Teresa, who had been captured and forced to serve the Japanese soldiers. Curious about James's incredible fighting skills, Colonel Ito questioned him about the origins of his training and demanded to know how to perform the forbidden technique. However, James remained tight-lipped about his master, refusing to reveal any information. In frustration, Ito threatened him with death the next day and ordered his men to capture him. The next morning, James was taken back to the makeshift fighting arena, where he had to face 3 other prisoners in a fierce battle. Despite their numbers, which made their fight unfair, James did not give up. After a few minutes of fighting, James gained the upper hand, and, despite being forced to do so, he had no choice but to beat his fellow prisoners. In the midst of despair, James came up with a bold plan, and that was to steal a radio from a Japanese soldier to call for help. The next day, while doing their daily work, he and his fellow prisoners created a diversion, aiming to draw the guards away from their posts. When the opportunity arose, James immediately took action and managed to get a Japanese radio. The next day, Colonel Ito called a meeting to remind the prisoners that anyone who attempted to escape would be severely punished. To emphasize his point, he publicly punished the prisoners he suspected of planning to escape. Despite this, James still insisted that their escape continue that night. He sneaked through the forest and carefully searched for a location where he could contact for support. While he was doing so, the Japanese soldiers conducted a routine inspection of the prison to make sure all the prisoners were there. Thanks to James's ingenuity, his shoes managed to save him, allowing him to avoid capture. Back at the camp, he shared his findings with the other prisoners, emphasizing that they needed someone who could speak code so they could send a message to the Allied forces. The next day, Ito summoned James again. This time, he asked James if he understood Navajo, an indigenous language that might have been heard near their territory. Despite this, James pretended not to know, which only angered Colonel Ito. Enraged, he declared that none of the prisoners would ever see their families again. As punishment for disobeying him, he tied James to 2 posts in the middle of the camp and ordered several Japanese soldiers to beat him. After inflicting serious injuries, Colonel Ito released him but ordered James to fight for his life. Bleeding and weak, the soldiers repeatedly beat him until he decided to fight. Desperate to survive, James once again showed his fighting skills and brought down his tormentors one by one. However, in a cruel twist, Colonel Ito kills several of the prisoners and orders Corporal Akito to put James unconscious. When James regains consciousness, he finds himself bandaged and being cared for by Teresa. The nurse explains that he is the first prisoner to receive such special treatment, an indication of his luck amidst their dire circumstances. Upon recovering, James returned to the prison with renewed determination. There, he gathered the other prisoners and encouraged them to stay strong, as their escape plan was about to begin. They informed him that during his unconscious state, they had found a document signed by General Douglas MacArthur. In the letter, he warned the Japanese forces that they would face American brutality if they did not release the prisoners of war. This revelation gave James and the other prisoners new hope, so that same night, they attempted to carry out their plan to establish communication. Unfortunately, their efforts were thwarted by tight security. One of the Japanese soldiers saw them, and, having no other choice, they killed him. However, as they were about to return to their prison, another young soldier suddenly appeared. James, showing unexpected mercy, ordered his comrades not to harm the boy. Before rushing back to their prison, when the guards conducted their routine check, they found every prisoner lying in their beds and found nothing suspicious. The next day, Colonel Ito called everyone together for another meeting. He claimed that one of James's comrades had attacked his soldier and ordered the prisoner to reveal the identities of those who had helped him. To avoid further injury, James claimed responsibility for the attack, insisting that he had acted alone in killing the guard. Colonel Ito, not believing James' words, called another prisoner to the front and ordered James to kill him using the forbidden technique. James refused to comply, prompting the commander to order one of the soldiers to kill the innocent man. To prevent further bloodshed, one of James' comrades took the blame and was punished by being pinned to death by several Japanese soldiers. When James' friend won the fight, Colonel Ito summoned our hero to his office. There, James challenged Ito to a duel, but the commander refused and instead sent him to perform tasks in the prison. While working, James gathered his colleagues and informed them that they needed to send a signal to the American forces that night. When darkness fell, They put their plan into action and went out with one of the prisoners who knew radio coding to communicate and ask for help. Fortunately, America received the signal that gave them great joy. In that message, they gave their location and anxiously waited for rescue. However, when they returned to the prison, they found that their comrades were no longer there. Shortly after, Japanese soldiers arrived and captured them. When they regained consciousness, they were greeted by chaos as they saw their camp under attack. Amidst the chaos, Teresa and her friend Anna rushed to their location to save the two of them. Once freed from their chains, they immediately checked the stolen radio, but found it broken. At that time, the attacking planes began to kill everything in sight by dropping powerful bombs. Realizing the gravity of the situation, James came up with a new plan, and this was to steal another Japanese radio. To help, Teresa teamed up with a fellow nurse, and together they knocked out a guard. Out of anger and a desire for revenge, the prisoners rallied against their captors. Although they knocked out most of the Japanese, some were not lucky enough to escape. Before their escape attempt could even take place, James confronted Ito again in his office and challenged him to a fight. Although hesitant, the commander had no other choice and engaged James in a sword fight. Their duel was fierce, but it was revealed that James was still superior in fighting skills. Just as he was about to finish off Colonel Ito, one of the prisoners intervened and urged James to leave the area before Japanese reinforcements arrived. As they ran away, Corporal Akito fired at them to stop them, but Colonel Ito intervened, allowing James and his companions to escape. They soon reached their destination and signaled the Americans, who quickly responded by neutralizing their attackers.
This is it! Final approach. Hold on! Hold on! It's up!
In the end, a few lucky prisoners of war, including 2 Filipino women, were evacuated and successfully escaped enemy territory. In the present, it is revealed that James's purpose in going to the dojo was to find out why Colonel Ito had let him live. Soon, the master dismissed his students and challenged James to a duel to determine if his father's story was true. After a fierce exchange of attacks, James emerged victorious. In the end, the master asked James to demonstrate the forbidden technique that his father had often told him about. Before parting ways, the master returned the valuable item that his father had taken from James. James revealed that it came from his father, thanked him for returning it, and the film ended here. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.